Hi, welcome to my review of the discriminant of the quadratic ax squared plus bx plus c equals 0. And as in every review, I treat it as a quiz where I give it a mark, or you can give it a mark for each question that's right and total up your pages. And this review has a total of 22 that find your number at the end and put it over 22 and convert it to a decimal, and then move a decimal 2 places to the right to get a percent. So this is the first page of 1 out of 3. So let's do the review. This is the review of the previous 4 videos on the value of the discriminant. Here we go, and the questions are in order as the videos are done. Find the value of the discriminant of each. So the discriminant is D for discriminant is b squared minus 4ac. So in this equation, which is ax squared plus bx plus c equals 0, a is 2, b is 3, and c is negative 4. So we sub b is 3 into the equation, and we put a is 2 into, I say equation, into the expression, and c is negative 4, and we work that out. We square first. 3 squared is 9. We multiply next. Negative times negative is a positive, and we get 16 times 2 is 32, and that adds up to be 41 for the value of discriminant. And if you're correct, give yourself a mark. Number 2, well, let's do a is 1, b is negative 4, and c is 7, and the discriminant d equals b squared minus 4ac, and b is negative 4, so it's a negative 4 squared minus 4. A is 1, c is 7, and again we square first. We get 16. Multiply next, which gives negative 28. Negative 4 times 1 times 7, and then we add to get a negative 8, or negative 8, negative 12. You swear I was a math teacher. Can't subtract. So 16 from 28, subtract 28 is negative 12. Give yourself another mark. Number 2, complete the table for each value of the discriminant of ax squared plus bx plus ax squared plus bx plus c equals 0. And we have the discriminant greater than 0, less equal to 0, and less than 0. So the discriminant is greater than 0. That means it's any number like 1, 2, 3, etc., etc. The type of root is real. And if the discriminant is greater than 0, the roots are unequal. Unequal, which means you could have a root of 1 and a root of 3, or a root of 2 plus root 3 and 2 minus root 3. If the discriminant is 0, the roots are going to be real, but equal to 0 is equal roots. So one root is 7, the other root is 7. If the root is a half, the other root is a half. And the value of the discriminant is less than 0, which means it's negative. And the square root of a negative number, the roots are imaginary, because you can't do the square root of a negative number. It's an I number. It stands for imaginary. And if you have imaginary roots with d less than 0, the roots are going to be unequal. And in that case, we could have a 2i and a negative 2i. We could have 3 plus 4i, 3 minus 4i. They're conjugate pairs. Number 3, for each of these blanks that you filled in correctly, then give yourself a mark for each, so a total of 6. Place the value of the discriminant in the blank. The discriminant is 0, 11, and negative 6. So if the roots are imaginary unequal, the discriminant has to be negative 6. Because if the roots are imaginary unequal, the discriminant got to be less than 0. If the roots are real and equal, then the discriminant, the value of the discriminant has to be a 0. Because when the discriminant is equal to 0, the roots are equal. So real equal, discriminant is 0. And the discriminant is real and unequal. The discriminant has to be 11. So if the roots are real and unequal, the discriminant got to be greater than 0, so that's 11. And for each one correct, give yourself a mark. Number 4, place greater than, equal to, or less than in the blank and find the other root. So I'll put find there, just an extra word, just in case. So if you have a root of 4 plus root 3, your discriminant is going to be which one? Is it going to be greater than 0, equal to 0, less than 0? So the discriminant is going to be greater than 0. And the other root is going to be its conjugate, is 4 minus root 3. And for each one of those, give yourself a mark. And if you have negative 6 subtract 2i, then your discriminant is going to be d is less than 0. And the conjugate is the negative 6 plus 2i. 2 more marks, 4 in total. And when you have it all done, total up the page. And hopefully you got 15 out of 15 and you know what you're doing. You have to know what the value, what the purpose of the discriminant is. It's in the quadratic formula, and what's underneath the root decides what type of root you're going to have. Number 5, another video that we did. Find the value of k for each. A, the roots are real and unequal of k x squared minus 6x plus 3 equals 0. So if the roots are real and unequal, that means the discriminant is greater than 0. And we know that the discriminant is equal to b squared minus 4ac. Therefore, b squared minus 4ac is equal to, is greater than 0. So real and unequal roots, discriminant is greater than or equal to 0. Okay, b squared minus 4ac is greater than 0 because we replace d with b squared minus 4ac. So in this question, we have a is k, b is negative 6, and c is 3. So we'll take b to be negative 6, sub it in. We take a to be k, we sub it in. And we take c to be 3, so we sub it in. So we subbed it into the expression. Now we'll work out that expression. We'll square first. Negative 6 is 36. We'll multiply next. Negative 4 times k times 3 is the negative 12k, greater than 0. And we're going to solve for k, so negative 12k is greater than negative 36 because we've moved it to the right side to make it negative. We divide both sides by negative 12, and I'll go up here, and the negative 12 cancels. And because I divide it by a negative number and an inequality, the sign changes. Again, when you divide by a negative number in the last step, you change to whatever sign is greater than to a less than to a greater than. So this sign changes because we divide it by a negative. And a negative 36 divided by negative 12 is 3. So this was discussed in my unit on graphing linear inequalities. When you divide an inequality by a negative number, you change the direction. So we have 3 marks. So if you wrote down this one correctly, you got 1 mark. If you simplified it to here, you got a mark. And if you got to here, you have another mark. And changing the direction of the inequality. Don't forget, 3 marks total. And B, x squared, add on k minus 2 times x plus 4 equals 0, has imaginary unequal roots. Well, really, I didn't have to say imaginary unequal. I could have just said imaginary because imaginary roots are unequal. So I didn't need this word, but I put it in there anyway. So if you have imaginary roots, they're going to be unequal, like 4i, negative 4i. 1 plus 2i, 1 minus 2i. So, imaginary roots, we have d is less than 0. And again, the discriminant is b squared minus 4ac. Therefore, b squared minus 4ac is less than 0. I sub b squared minus 4ac in the place of d. So let's solve this. Again, A is 1, B is k minus 2, and C is 4. So B is k minus 2 squared. A is 1. C is 4. So we take, greater, less than. I was going to write an equal sign then, but we've got to be careful. Less than is here. So we take our time and square this. So let's do the FOIL. Let's write it down twice. I'm always making sure I follow, the example. Work things out slowly. So I square it and multiply it by itself. FOIL, k times k, k squared. K times negative 2, negative 2k. Negative 2 times k, negative 2k. Negative 2 times negative 2 plus 4. So what I did here was FOIL. First, outside, inside, last. And now I multiply next, so I get a negative 4 times 1 times 4 is a negative 16. And we simplify the right side, k squared minus 4k minus 12 less than 0. Notice now, up here, I had a linear, k to the 1 power, so there's only one answer. But here I have a quadratic, so I have two answers. So let's factor this quadratic. Even though it's a k, it's still a quadratic. Like, that's a quadratic in terms of x. This is a quadratic in terms of k. So k squared is k times k. Notice the product is negative 12, which is right here. The sum is negative 4. Because that's a 1 coefficient here, the product is a times c, which is a negative 12, and the sum is negative 4. So the factors of 12 to give you, we have 1, 12, 2, 6, 4, 4. So which pair of factors will give you 4? 12 and 1, no. 4 and 4, no. Add. 13, subtract 11, add. 8, subtract 0. So it's 6 and a 2. But the product is negative. That means one of them must be plus and one of them must be minus. But since the sum is negative, that means the larger number has to be negative. So negative 6 plus 2. Multiply. Negative 6 and 2, negative 12. Add. Negative 4. So when there's a 1 here and you can factor, then it's easy to do it like this. That means we let, for a second, this equals 0. And we let this one equals 0. That means that k, each factor is equal. If you multiplied two numbers to get 0, one of them is 0 or both of them is 0. So k minus 6 is 0, k is 6. If k plus 2 is equal to 0, k is negative 2. So what we're going to do, because it's an inequality, and there will be a unit done after this one, after the quadratics on linear or quadratic inequalities. The linear inequality unit is done, but I'll do a unit on quadratic inequalities after this unit is done on the quadratics. So here we go. We have k to be negative 2, so let's pretend negative 2 is there. K is 6, let's put 6 up here. And so we're looking at what fits in this inequality. So let's look at a number above this, which is a 7. Let's look at a number in between these two, which is a 0. And let's look at a number down to the left of the negative 2. So somewhere we're above the 6, we're below the negative 2, or we're in between. Remember, less than, as I told you before, between these two numbers, less than is in between. Greater than is on the outside of the 6 and on the outside of the negative 2. So I can write that down, but I'll explain. The answer to this is negative 2, because it's a less than. Negative 2 is less than k less than 6, which is the interval, if you want, open at negative 2 and open at negative 6. If this was an equal sign, this would be a bar, like a square bracket, but it's not. So that's the answer. That's the values. That's the solution. That's the solution to the values of k. Either you can write it down as an interval or as a bracket notation, interval notation. But let me explain. Let's take this inequality. which is k minus 6k plus 2 is less than 0. Let's take this inequality, and we're going to put in 7. K is 7. Let's put 7 in, see what happens. So if you put 7 in, you get a 1 and a 9. 9 is less than 9. 9 is less than 0. No. So we can't have 7. If we put in an 8, we're still going to get a positive number, so it won't work. So we can't go to the right of 6. Let's try 0. K is 0. 0 is in between the two. So I'm going to write down the expression. This is important because it will, what I'm explaining here, will be used in the inequalities, quadratic inequalities, but it'll also be used in the polynomials, graphing cubics and quartics and quintics. That's in the higher grades, the method I'm going to use here. And it's also used in absolute value inequalities. Very important what I'm doing here now. So k is 0, so I put a 0 in. Now notice I'm explaining it, but really, if you just want to put 0 in here and say negative 6, and the 0 here is 2, and it gives you negative 12, perfect. So a negative 12 would, what we say, give me a negative, this much. So I get a negative 6 and a 2, and it gives me negative 12 less than 0. That's true. So any number in between negative 2 and 6 will give me a negative. Any number above 6 will give me a positive. And what about the number below? Well, if this is a positive and that's a negative, what's this going to be? So now I'm going to use k is negative 3. And in your head, if you wanted to, if you put a negative 3, that's what I do. I just write them down. I work it out in my head, and then I just put the answer in. But I'm showing you all the steps here. Negative 3 goes into place of k, gives me a negative 9. Negative 3 goes into place of k, gives me negative 1. And negative 9 times negative 1 is 9, less than 0, no. So that's negative 3 gives you a positive number. Notice 9 is positive. So if you put the positive number, put on negative 3 and you get a positive. So less than, the less than symbol right here, less than, stands for a negative number when you plug it in. So when you plug a 1 in, right here, you get a negative number between this product. So again, 7 is a plus, negative 3 is a plus, and the numbers in between here gives me a negative. And that's fully explaining. Anyway, you have how many marks? Well, if you wrote this line down, you get a mark because you got to use less than. If you simplified it to this equation, you got a mark. If you worked out the two values of k, like that, you got a mark. And if you worked out the final answer, you got a mark. So 4 marks altogether. Add up, and you got a mark out of 7 for that page. Total up your pages, and when you do, go back to the beginning and put your mark over 22 and convert it to a percent. And hopefully you understand what the value of the discriminant. More work will be done on that later in the context of graphing and how it all works out. If you like my video, click the like button, subscribe button, and if you have a notification bell, click on it because there's more videos coming. Visit my math website, www.mathfullyexplained.com, to find more information about me, my videos, and the content. And that's the content on my math channel called Math Fully Explained on my YouTube channel. Thank you very much. Bye-bye.